How do you come back from your own wedding being called off in front of more than 200 people because your in-laws mocked your mother? How do you stay calm when everyone says you embarrassed their family, but you're the only one who knows they just blew up the one man holding their future together? This is how I went from the quiet, disrespected groom to the man sitting across from them when the lawyer read out the consequences. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Ethan, and my wedding ended before I ever put a ring on my wife's finger. It was a big hotel ballroom with white tablecloths and gold chairs and way too many flowers. When I walked in, I felt like I was stepping onto a stage that someone else had built. Most of the faces I saw were from Lena's side. Her family is large and loud. They filled the room with bright dresses, strong perfume, and the kind of laughter that sounds like it comes from people who already decided they are the main characters. My mother, Rosa, stood near the back wall, next to her fiancé, Victor. She wore a light blue dress that she had been worried might be too simple, but to me she looked beautiful and calm. She held her small clutch with both hands, the way she does when she feels nervous but is trying not to show it. Victor stood straight next to her in a dark suit, one hand on her lower back, talking softly to her. They looked like their own little island in a sea of strangers. I noticed right away that the seating chart was uneven. The tables for Lena's side were near the front, close to the head table and the dance floor. My family's tables were pushed to the far side, near the service doors. It was not a surprise. During planning, Lena's mother kept reminding us that her relatives were flying in from all over and that they needed to be front and center. I had told myself that it was fine, that it was just one night. The photographer called for family photos. I walked over to my mother and Victor and told them that it was time. My mother smiled and fixed my tie. She said that she could not believe her little boy was getting married. Her voice shook on the word little, and I realized she was trying not to cry. We went up to the photo area, where Lena's family stood in a big crowd, already arranging themselves. Her father, Carlos, took charge. He pointed at people, moved them like pieces, and told the photographer who should stand where. He greeted Victor with a big handshake and a loud laugh, calling him his generous friend who had made this whole day possible. He did not even say my mother's name. He just nodded at her quickly, as if she was someone's assistant, not his future in-law. The photographer asked for a picture of both families together. My mother stepped forward. Before she could find a place, Lena's Aunt Pilar blocked her with an arm and told the photographer to first get one of the bride's family. She said that my side could join after the important ones. My mother froze. Her hand, still holding her clutch, hovered near her chest. She stepped back again and almost bumped into a chair. I forced a smile and told myself that they probably did not mean it that way. I told my mother that we would get our turn. She smiled at me and said that it was okay, that it was Lena's day. Her eyes were wet, but she kept her chin up. We took a few photos with my side, rushed and out of place. I saw the difference in how the photographer spoke. With Lena's family, he joked and took time. With us, he looked at his watch. During cocktail hour, the little things kept piling up. People from Lena's side walked past my mother without greeting her. Some gave her quick, tight smiles and then turned to hug Victor warmly, thanking him again and again for the venue, the catering, the upgrades. My mother stood there, smiling politely, not sure where to put her hands. At one point, I passed by a small group of Lena's cousins and older relatives near the bar. I heard my mother's name and slowed down without meaning to. Tasha, Lena's younger cousin, was laughing. She talked about my mother's dress, saying it looked like something from a clearance rack. Someone else asked how old Victor was, and if my mother was just waiting for him to die and leave her everything. They laughed, as if it was the funniest thing they had ever said. I felt my face get hot. For a second, I wanted to walk over and say something, but I remembered Lena's words from the week before, when I had pointed out another rude comment from her family. She had told me that her relatives were just joking, that they had strong personalities, and that I needed to be less sensitive. So I took a breath, turned away, and told myself once again that it was only for one night. The ceremony itself went by in a blur. I watched Lena come down the aisle, looking perfect, and I tried to push everything else aside. When we stood at the front, I saw my mother sitting near the back, not where I had asked for her to be, but in a row near the door. Victor sat beside her, his jaw tight. We got through the vows, the rings, the kiss. People clapped and cheered. For a moment, I let myself believe that maybe things would get better after this, that this was just tension from bringing two very different families together. Then we moved into the reception, and the illusion broke again. When we entered the ballroom as newlyweds, the DJ called out our names, and the crowd clapped. I watched my mother stand and clap too, her whole face bright with pride. After the first dance, we sat at the head table. Lena leaned in and told me that her family had prepared some surprise speeches. She smiled and said that they were just going to have some fun. The official speeches went fine. My best man talked about college stories. Lena's sister talked about growing up with her. There were some light jokes, but nothing cruel. Then Tasha stood up, holding a microphone she was not supposed to have. She had already been drinking, and her face was pink. People cheered as she walked into the center of the dance floor. I saw the DJ look confused, but he did not stop the music right away. She began talking about Lena's side of the family. At first, it was just noisy, silly stuff. She talked about how Lena always had good taste and never settled for less. People laughed. Then she shifted. She started talking about my mother. She said that Lena had always wanted more, and that everyone could see that she had leveled up from my family. She talked about how my mother, a former nurse, had gotten lucky late in life by landing Victor, the rich older man at the back table. She said that not everyone could be so lucky to find a man to pay for everything twice, once for the wedding and once for the retirement. The crowd's laughter turned shaky. Some people looked down at their plates. Some still laughed, but quieter. I felt my stomach twist. I looked at my mother. She was sitting very still, hands folded, eyes fixed on the table in front of her. Tasha kept going. She joked about my father being dead and my mother trading up. She said that Lena had done something similar, moving from her simple boyfriend to a man who could give her stability and contacts. She waved toward Victor and called him their sponsor. She waved toward the front and called me safe. It felt like the air had changed. People shifted in their seats. I could hear the clink of glasses, the rustle of dresses, the low hum of whispers. A few guests had their phones up, recording. I saw a tiny red light on one of them. Someone in the corner covered her mouth with her hand. I looked at Lena. Her smile had gone stiff. She was half laughing, half frowning, as if she wanted to stop Tasha but did not know how without making a scene. Her parents sat there without moving. Carlos had a small smile on his face, like he was enjoying a private joke. Mariana stared at Victor, waiting to see how he would react. My mother's shoulders began to shake. At first, I thought she was laughing politely, but then I saw her hand go to her eyes. Victor leaned in and said something softly to her. She nodded once, swallowed hard, and kept looking down. I stood up halfway, then sat back down. I felt frozen between wanting to grab the microphone and not wanting to blow up the night. There was a small voice in my head that kept saying that if I caused a scene, I would be the one blamed. Another voice, quieter but clearer, asked how much more I expected my mother to take. The room went dead silent. The music that had been playing quietly in the background suddenly seemed too loud and then cut off. Tasha's words seemed to hang in the air. She looked around, finally noticing the discomfort, and tried to turn it into a laugh again. Victor pushed his chair back and stood up. He did not raise his voice. He did not throw anything. He just stood there, tall and steady, one hand resting on the back of my mother's chair. The entire ballroom turned to look at him. Even the servers stopped moving. I saw something in his face that I had not seen before. It was not anger the way most people show it. It was something colder, heavier, like a door closing. He spoke slowly, telling the room that he would not sit quietly while the woman he loved was mocked in front of hundreds of people. He said that this was not the first time that he had heard comments from this family before, and that today it was enough. He said that he would not bless a marriage that starts with this kind of disrespect toward his fiancée and toward his future stepson's mother. There was a murmur around the room. Someone at a nearby table gasped. Lena's mother's face went pale. Carlos tried to stand, then hesitated. My mother touched Victor's arm, as if to calm him, but he gently took her hand and helped her to her feet. She looked around the room with red eyes, but kept her back straight. For the first time that day, her sadness looked heavier than her hope. Victor told the room that he and Rosa were leaving, and that as far as he was concerned, there would be no wedding today. My heart dropped. It was like the floor shifted under me. Behind the shock, though, there was a small part of me that felt something else. A sharp, painful relief that someone had finally said out loud that this was not okay. They began to walk toward the exit. The crowd parted around them. Some people lowered their eyes. Others stared openly. I saw a few phones held up, still filming. I pushed my chair back and followed them. As I moved away from the head table, I heard the DJ cut the music completely. The speakers went silent. The only sounds in the ballroom were the echo of our footsteps, the scrape of chairs, and the soft buzz of phones starting to record in the sudden, heavy quiet. I followed my mother and Victor out of the ballroom, past the open doors, into the cooler air of the hallway. People moved aside without looking at us. I could feel their eyes on my back, but no one said anything. The noise from the ballroom faded behind us, turning into a low, messy hum. We stepped out onto the terrace. The air was sharp and smelled like rain, even though the sky was still clear. Fairy lights hung in strings above us, and the city lights stretched out beyond the railing. My mother leaned on the stone ledge and took a deep breath like she had been holding it for hours. Her shoulders were shaking. Victor stood close to her, one hand steady on her arm. I walked up slowly. I opened my mouth to talk, but nothing came out at first. I felt like there was a weight pressing on my chest. My mother spoke before I could. She told me she was sorry. She said she had not wanted to ruin my day. She said she should have stayed quiet, that maybe if she had thicker skin, this would not have happened. Hearing her apologize broke something in me. This woman had worked night shifts to raise me after my father died. She had worn secondhand clothes so I could have new school shoes. Now she was saying sorry for being mocked in a room full of people who barely knew her. I told her that she did not ruin anything. I told her that none of this was her fault. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, flat and tight. Victor looked at me in a way that made me feel like he was weighing something. He said calm, simple words. He told me he had warned Lena's parents before. He said he had pulled Carlos aside months ago and asked him to stop the comments about Rosa's background and about money. He told me that they had promised to be respectful. He said this night showed that they never meant it. I stared at him. I had not known that he had already spoken to them. My mother had never told me. She always tried to protect me from extra stress. I realized she had probably been hiding more of their comments than I knew. Inside the ballroom, I could hear the DJ trying to play soft background music again, like a bandage on a deep cut. A messy murmur of voices rose and fell. Somewhere, someone laughed too quickly, trying to pretend everything was fine. Lena appeared in the doorway to the terrace. Her hair was slightly messed up from running. Her makeup still looked perfect, but her face was tight. She walked straight to me and grabbed my arm. She asked what I was doing, why I had just walked out, what we were going to tell everyone. Her voice was high and fast. She said that her relatives were just joking and that sometimes they went too far, but they did not mean harm. Victor turned toward her. He did not shout. He simply said that his fiancée had been insulted, not once, but again and again. He said he had listened to months of small comments, had listened to people joke about Rosa being a gold digger, had listened to them talk about his money like it was theirs already. He said he would not stand in a room where the woman he loved was called that in front of hundreds of strangers. Lena looked at my mother. My mother would not lift her eyes. For a second, I hoped Lena would walk over to my mother and say she was sorry. Instead, she stepped closer to Victor and told him that this was a misunderstanding. She said that Tasha was drunk, that her family's humor was rough, that they did not mean it literally. Victor shook his head once. He said he had heard enough. He said what he saw tonight was not a misunderstanding, but a mirror that showed how they really saw Rosa and, by extension, me. He told me he would take my mother home. He said that if I wanted to leave with them, I was welcome, but he also understood if I felt I had to go back inside and deal with the mess. His voice was sad but steady. My mother looked at me, eyes shiny. She touched my cheek lightly and told me to stay and not worry about her. She said she would be okay. Watching them walk away hurt more than anything that had happened inside. The hotel door closed behind them with a soft click, and I stood there with Lena, surrounded by fairy lights and distant traffic. Lena started talking fast. She said we could fix this. She said we just needed to calm everyone down, finish the dinner, and talk to my mother tomorrow. She kept saying it was my mother's feelings that had gotten out of control, that Victor had overreacted. I stared at her. I asked if she thought what Tasha said was okay. She hesitated, then said, "Of course it was not okay, but it was just a joke that went too far." She said my mother should have ignored it for the sake of the day. Those words hit me harder than the jokes had. We went back inside, not as a happy married couple, but as two people trying to patch a sinking ship with paper towels. The ballroom felt different now. Some guests avoided looking at us. Others pretended nothing had happened. I saw a few people huddled over their phones, probably watching the video of Tasha's speech and Victor's announcement. Carlos came straight toward us. His face was red. He asked what Victor's problem was. He said that walking out like that was disrespectful to them and to all the guests. He said that my mother had always been too sensitive and that she needed to learn to handle jokes. I reminded him what Tasha had actually said. I asked him if he would be okay hearing his own wife called those things in front of a room full of people with cameras. He brushed it off. He said that in their family they tease each other and that it is normal. He said my side needed to loosen up and not act like victims. Later, Lena pulled me into the small bridal suite. The door shut behind us, and the noise from the ballroom faded. The room smelled like hairspray and flowers. The chair where she had sat to have her makeup done was still in front of the mirror. She told me we needed to decide what we were going to say to everyone. She thought we should tell guests that Victor had a health scare, that there was some misunderstanding, but that the marriage was still valid. She said we could hold a small blessing later, maybe at her parents' house without my mother if that made things easier. Those last words sat between us like a stone. I asked her if easier meant not inviting my own mother. She looked tired. She said her parents were very upset and that it might be best to keep things simple. She said my mother could see us separately on another day. She talked about logistics as if this was a scheduling problem. I thought back to the months before the wedding. I remembered the first family dinner at their restaurant after we got engaged. My mother had worn a brown dress she loved. She had brought homemade cookies as a small gift. Mariana had thanked her, but then joked to the table that now Victor would not let my mother cook anymore, since he could buy her anything. Everyone laughed. I had smiled weakly and said nothing. I remembered tasting cake samples at the venue. My mother had said she liked a simple vanilla one best. Carlos had laughed and told the vendor to bring something more modern, because they could not serve basic hospital cake to their guests. My mother had gone quiet. Later, she told me she would eat whatever they chose. I remembered a planning meeting where Lena showed her mother photos of dresses. When my mother tried to give a gentle opinion, Mariana had said that styles like that were for older women who do not have to impress anyone anymore. My mother had folded her hands and smiled politely. All those times, I had told myself it was not worth a fight. In the bridal suite, I looked at Lena's reflection in the mirror. She still looked like a perfect bride, but the woman in front of me was someone who could ask me to celebrate my marriage while quietly cutting my mother out. I told her I could not pretend nothing had happened. I said that if her family could not even apologize properly, something was very wrong. She said they had said sorry already in their way. She said Tasha would send flowers. She said we could not let one bad speech ruin our future. I did not answer. There was nothing left to say without turning this into a screaming match, and I felt too tired to scream. We went back out and tried to get through the rest of the night. People came up to us with forced smiles. Some hugged us and whispered that they were sorry about the scene. Others told us not to let old people drama ruin anything. At one point, I saw Tasha again. She had taken off her shoes and was dancing, still laughing. When our eyes met, she shrugged and mouthed that she had not meant it. Then she turned away and started talking into her phone again, like everything was content. By the time the night was over, I felt like I had lived through 10 years instead of a few hours. The staff cleared tables around us. The lights in the ballroom grew brighter as the DJ packed up. Lena and I left separately from her parents. Carlos barely looked at me. Mariana kissed Lena on the cheek and told her they would fix things. She did not even glance at my empty hands. When we reached our apartment, it was past midnight. The living room looked exactly as we had left it that morning, a pair of wine glasses on the coffee table, a small banner a friend had hung that said, "Just married." Now the words felt like a joke. I went to the bedroom, loosened my tie, and sat on the edge of the bed. Lena took off her dress in the bathroom and came out in a t-shirt, her hair still done in perfect curls. She sat beside me and leaned her head on my shoulder. She said that she knew her family had been out of line, but she also said that they were my family now too, and that we needed to accept them as they were. She asked me to talk to my mother and to Victor, to convince them to calm down so that we could plan another celebration. I stared at the floor. The carpet pattern swam in front of my eyes. I did not trust myself to answer, so I said I was tired and needed to sleep. She went quiet and lay down on her side, facing away from me. The room was dark except for the dim light from the street coming through the curtains. The hum of traffic outside was steady and distant. I lay on my back, eyes open, and watched the shadows on the ceiling. I thought about my mother's face when she apologized on the terrace. I thought about Victor's voice when he said this was not the first time. I thought about how easy it had been for Lena's family to laugh at us. My phone was on the nightstand. At some point, I heard it buzz. The screen lit up the room for a second. I reached over and picked it up. It was a message from Victor. He thanked me for following them outside. He said he knew the night had been hard for me too. Then he wrote that there were things about Lena's family's situation and his connection to them that I did not know. He said he wanted me to come by the next day, just me, so he could explain everything. I stared at the message for a long time, the blue light of the screen glowing in the dark, while Lena breathed softly beside me. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had not slept at all. The apartment was quiet. Lena had already left for her parents' house. She had told me quickly that morning that they needed her help dealing with the fallout. She said that her mother was in tears and her father was furious. She suggested that I give them a day to cool down before I came over. I agreed, mostly because I did not have the energy to argue. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold in my hands. My wedding suit jacket hung over a chair. The small "Just Married" banner over the window looked like a joke someone had forgotten to take down. Around 10, I finally picked up my phone and wrote back to Victor. I told him I would come by. Their townhouse was about 20 minutes away. I drove there in silence. The radio turned off. My reflection in the windshield looked older than it had a week ago. Rosa opened the door. She wore a simple sweater and jeans. Her eyes were puffy, but she smiled when she saw me. She pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than usual. I felt her shoulders sag a little as she let out a breath. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and something warm in the oven. Victor was in the living room, sitting in an armchair by the window. He stood when I came in and reached out his hand. His grip was firm, steady, exactly like it had been when he stood up in the ballroom. They led me to the couch. My mother sat beside me. Victor sat across from us. There was a moment of silence, the kind that comes before something important. Victor started by saying that he was sorry for how the night had turned out, not because he regretted defending Rosa, but because he knew it had put me in a hard position between two families. He said he understood that I was trying to build a life with Lena and that he had not wanted to hurt that. I told him that he had done what I should have done a long time ago. The words surprised even me, but once they were out, I knew they were true. My mother put a hand on my arm. She told me that she never wanted to be the cause of trouble in my marriage. She said she could handle people talking badly about her if it meant I could be happy. Hearing that only made the knot in my chest tighter. Victor took a breath and leaned forward. He said there were things I needed to know about his history with Lena's family. He explained that years ago, long before Lena and I met, Carlos had been in serious financial trouble with the family restaurant. Business was bad, and he was behind on payments. The bank had been close to taking the building. Victor had stepped in then. He had met Carlos through some mutual contacts in the business world. He had offered to help as a private investor and lender. He said he had not done it for charity. He had done it as a business decision, with proper agreements and security. It just happened that later, through different circles, he met my mother and they fell in love. He told me that he had quietly become a secured lender for the Alvarez restaurant and later for the event hall where we had planned the wedding. He said that the buildings themselves were part of the security. He did not go into full legal detail, but he said clearly that if certain conditions were not met, he had the right to call in the loans or change who controlled what. I sat there, slowly absorbing that information. I had known that Victor was successful and that he helped people, but I had not realized how deep his connection to Lena's family went. He went on. He said that when he and my mother got engaged, he had told Carlos privately that he wanted respect to be mutual. He had explained that he would not tolerate his fiancée being treated as less than. He had warned him that if the family could not show basic respect, then their relationship as business partners would also change. Victor said that Carlos had smiled and said that they were all family and that of course they respected Rosa. Then, according to Victor, he had gone back to his old comments as soon as my mother was out of earshot. My mother looked at her hands. I realized that she had probably heard some of those comments and had decided not to tell me. She had never wanted to put weight on my shoulders if she could carry it herself. Victor then mentioned something that made me sit up straighter. He said that in his estate planning, he had arranged things so that Rosa would be secure if anything happened to him. He said that because I was her only child, and because he trusted my judgment, he had listed me as an alternate trustee on some of his structures. He did not name them or show me papers. He just said that I would have a say one day if he stepped back or became unable to manage his affairs. I felt strange hearing that. On one hand, it made me feel honored. On the other hand, it made everything feel much heavier. This was not just about a rude speech and a ruined wedding. This was about long-term ties and serious money. Victor said that after what happened at the wedding, he could not in good conscience leave things the way they were. He said he needed to protect Rosa and, by extension, me. He said he was going to speak to his lawyer, Martin, about his investments with the Alvarezes. He asked if I would be willing to come to that meeting. He said it would help if Martin heard directly from me about what had been said and how things had played out. I agreed. There was not much else to say. Part of me was afraid of what that would mean. Another part of me felt something I had not felt in a long time in connection with Lena's family, the sense that I was not completely powerless. After a while, my mother brought out coffee and some pastries. We talked about small things for a bit, trying to shake off the heavy mood. But beneath the surface, I could feel a shift. For the first time, I was not just the quiet son or the polite future in-law. I was someone whose presence in that meeting would matter. When I left their townhouse, the air outside felt colder. On the drive back, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Lena, asking if I could come to her parents' restaurant that afternoon. She said they wanted to talk things through face-to-face. I thought about ignoring it, but I knew that would only make things worse. So I wrote back that I would come. The Alvarez restaurant was half full when I arrived. It was mid-afternoon, between lunch and dinner, so only a few tables were occupied. A couple of regulars sat at the bar. The staff recognized me and gave me careful looks, like they were watching for drama. The front dining area looked the same as always. Framed photos of family gatherings on the walls, a big chalkboard with daily specials written in bright colors, small plants on the tables. For years, I had told myself this place felt like a second home. Now it felt like walking onto a stage where I had been given a background role. Carlos waited for me near the bar. He wore his usual white shirt with rolled-up sleeves, but his smile was gone. He greeted me with a stiff handshake and told me that we should sit in the back office to talk in private. On the way through the dining room, I heard two women at a table whispering. One of them mentioned the wedding, the walkout, and something about a video going around in a group chat. I kept walking. The office in the back was small and crowded. Papers were stacked on the desk. A calendar with family birthdays circled in red hung on the wall. Mariana sat in one of the chairs, arms crossed. Lena stood behind her, looking tired. There was tension in the air like a storm. Carlos closed the door and leaned against it. He said they were very upset about Victor's behavior. He said that walking out and calling off his support in front of everyone was a humiliation for their family and their business. He said it made them look unstable. Mariana added that her sisters had been calling her all night, asking what happened, saying that people were talking. She said that they had already spent so much money and effort on the wedding and that it was not fair for everything to be ruined because my mother could not take a joke. I reminded them what had been said. I described Tasha's speech, every cruel line about my mother being a gold digger, about my father, about Victor's money. I said that this was not a teasing comment among close relatives. This was a public attack, with cameras recording. They waved that off. Carlos said that Tasha had too much to drink and that she had already said she was sorry. Mariana said that my mother should understand the difference between real insults and family teasing. She said that people like them joked in ways that more sensitive people did not understand. Then Carlos changed the subject to money. He said that because Victor had walked out, they were now in an awkward position with vendors and guests. He said they needed to show strength and stability. He said the best thing would be to schedule another, smaller ceremony as soon as possible, maybe at their restaurant or house, and that we needed to cover the costs. When he said we, it became very clear he meant me. He said that since Victor had caused the scene, it was only fair that my side compensated them. He suggested that I use my savings to pay for a second event, to show that I was committed and to repair the damage to their image. He said that if I was serious about being part of their family, I would step up. Lena did not look at me. She stared at the floor. I asked if any of them planned to apologize directly to my mother, not just send flowers or a message passed through me. Mariana said that she would consider it when my mother calmed down. She said that for now, the priority was to fix what everyone else saw. While we were talking, there was a knock on the office door. Carlos opened it a little. Tasha slipped in, still in casual clothes, her phone in her hand. She looked almost amused by the whole situation. She said she had heard that we were having a serious talk and that she wanted to help. She told me that the video from the wedding had already been sent around in several group chats. She said some people thought it was hilarious and that it made our families look dramatic and rich. She laughed and said that if anyone tried to make legal trouble, it would only bring more attention. She said nobody wanted that. The way she spoke, it was clear she believed we would stay quiet to avoid embarrassment, that we would never risk bringing lawyers into what she saw as family drama. Something in me shifted then. All the times I had swallowed anger at small comments. All the nights I had told myself to be patient. All the times I had let them lead because I did not want to be the problem. They sat in my chest like rocks. In that cramped office, listening to them talk about my mother like she was the one who needed to toughen up. Listening to them talk about my future as if it was a tool to fix their reputation, something became very clear. I was not dealing with people who had made one mistake. I was dealing with people who believed they could say and do whatever they wanted without consequences, because they thought I would never push back. I stopped trying to convince them. I told them in a calm voice that I needed time to think before agreeing to anything. I said I would not commit to another ceremony or pay for anything until I had spoken again with my mother and with Victor. Carlos did not like that answer. His jaw tightened. He reminded me that the community was watching, that people were talking, that this was my chance to prove I was on their side. Mariana said that she hoped I realized how much they were sacrificing for me. Lena finally spoke. She said softly that she hoped I would not let this break us. She said she loved me and wanted us to have a fresh start. I did not respond to that directly. I just repeated that I needed time. When I left the office and stepped back into the front dining area, the air felt thinner. I walked past the tables, past the bar, past the photos on the walls. Outside, the sky had started to cloud. The street looked gray. As I reached my car, my phone vibrated again. It was Victor calling. I answered. His voice was calm. He said that he had just gotten off the phone with his lawyer, Martin. He said that Martin wanted to meet with both of us to review his investments connected to the Alvarez family and to discuss next steps. He asked if I was available the next day. A few seconds after we ended the call, my email notified me of a new calendar invitation. I opened it and saw the subject line: Meeting, Alvarez Accounts and Future Control. Under attendees, I saw Victor's name, Martin's, and mine. I stared at the screen, feeling the old habit of backing down rise up inside me. Then I thought of my mother's face at the wedding and Tasha's smirk in the office. I accepted the invitation. The next morning, I went back to work, like it was any normal weekday. The office looked exactly the same as always. Rows of desks, computer screens glowing, the soft buzz of printers and quiet conversations. People greeted me with their usual small talk. A few coworkers asked how the wedding went. I told them it had been complicated and made a small joke about family drama. They laughed politely and moved on, unaware that the ring on my finger felt like a piece of metal I did not know what to do with. I sat at my desk, opened my email, and tried to focus on numbers and reports. It felt almost peaceful, dealing with lines and columns that did not talk back or make cruel jokes. But my mind kept drifting back to the ballroom, the terrace, the restaurant office. After a while, I stopped pretending I was going to get any real work done. I opened my online banking instead. I went through every transfer related to the wedding. I checked deposits I had paid for the venue, the florist, the photographer, the catering. I compared them to the shared spreadsheet Lena and I had used during planning. It was clear that my side had already covered a large share of the costs, even before Victor's help. I started downloading statements. I saved them as PDFs to a folder on my work computer, then moved them to a personal drive. I did not have a plan yet. It just felt important not to rely only on memory. I moved on to messages. I scrolled through my chat with Lena, past weeks of photos and hearts and planning notes. Buried between them were small red flags I had ignored, moments where she repeated her mother's complaints about my mother being too emotional, jokes about how her family could be harsh but harmless, comments about how much they were doing for us. I took screenshots of some of those lines, not because I wanted to use them against her, but because they were part of the picture. By noon, my stomach reminded me I had not eaten. I stepped away from my desk and walked to a coffee shop near the office. It was a small place with wooden tables and a steady stream of people with laptops. As I stood in line, my coworker and friend Noah spotted me. He waved and asked if he could join. I said yes. We ordered coffee and a couple of sandwiches and sat near the window. Noah asked me again how the wedding went. This time, I told him more. I explained in flat sentences what Tasha had said, how my mother had been treated, how Victor had walked out. I told him about the restaurant office and the way Lena's parents expected me to fix their image. He listened quietly, his brow furrowing. When I finished, he shook his head. He said that if anyone had spoken about his mother like that, he would have shut the whole thing down on the spot. He asked why I was even considering staying tied to people who thought that was acceptable. I told him that I still loved Lena, or at least the version of her I thought I knew. I said I did not want to throw away years over one terrible night. He raised an eyebrow and asked if I really believed it was just one night. He reminded me of small things I had told him over the past year. Jokes about my mother's job, comments about my background, arguments about seating and invitations. He said the wedding was not a single storm. It was the roof finally collapsing after years of cracks. His words hit hard because they lined up so perfectly with what I already felt. He asked what I planned to do. I said, for now, I was going to a meeting with Victor's lawyer. I said I did not know the details yet, only that it had to do with Victor's investments in the Alvarez businesses. Noah looked serious. He told me that whatever I did, I should make sure I protected myself and my mother first. He said that people who think you are weak only stop when something proves them wrong, and words rarely do that. He said systems did. I went back to the office feeling a little clearer, like someone had wiped dust off a mirror. A few hours later, I left work early and headed to Martin Blake's office. It was in a tall glass building downtown. The lobby smelled of polished stone and coffee. People in suits walked quickly through the space, talking into phones or carrying folders. I checked in at the front desk and took the elevator up. When the doors opened on Martin's floor, I stepped into a quiet hallway lined with framed certificates and abstract art. A receptionist greeted me and showed me to a seating area in the lobby of the office. Victor was already there, sitting in a leather chair. He stood as I approached, shook my hand, and asked how I was holding up. I told him I was tired but clear. He nodded, like he understood exactly what that meant. The receptionist told us that Martin would be with us shortly. We sat down. Through a glass wall, I could see part of a large conference room with a long table. It looked like the kind of room where real decisions were made, not the kind where people yelled over each other to feel important. I thought about how different this space felt from the Alvarez restaurant office. Here, everything was quiet and ordered. People spoke softly at the front desk. Phones were on silent. No one was waving their arms or turning every sentence into a performance. Does it matter where a person feels at home? I asked myself that as I looked around. For years, I had told myself I was becoming part of Lena's world. Now, sitting next to Victor in this calm lobby, I realized I had always been slightly out of place there. Martin came out to greet us. He was in his 40s, with gray at his temples and a calm, measured way of moving. He shook my hand and thanked me for coming on short notice. He led us to a smaller meeting room, not the big conference room yet. Inside, the table was covered with neat stacks of folders. A legal pad lay in front of each chair. There were no raised voices in this space, only the soft sounds of paper sliding and pens tapping. Martin asked me to start from the beginning. He wanted to hear my version of what had happened at the wedding, from the first moments in the ballroom to Victor's decision to walk out. He took notes as I spoke. I told him everything, step by step. I explained how my mother had been pushed aside during photos, how Tasha and the others had joked about her in front of guests, how the speech had gone from playful to brutal. I described the look on my mother's face, the phones recording, the silence in the room when Victor stood up. Martin listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked a few specific questions. He wanted to know if I saw anyone recording clearly, if I knew any guests well enough to ask them for copies, if I had any messages from Lena's family about my mother or about Victor's money. I thought about the guests I had seen with raised phones. I thought about a college friend who had been there and loved to film things. I thought about the family chat screenshots I had glanced at on Lena's phone over the months, the ones I had ignored because I did not want to start fights. I pulled out my phone and showed him a few messages I had already captured. Lines where Lena's relatives called my mother names in private chats. Lines where they joked about Victor being their ticket out. Martin's expression did not change much, but he underlined something on his notepad. He said that these kinds of messages could be useful later, not for revenge, but for context. He then turned to Victor's side of things. He summarized the existing business arrangements in simple terms. Victor had lent the Alvarez's money as a private lender. The restaurant and the event hall were part of the security for those loans. There were conditions in the contracts about how the relationship should be handled, conditions that included respect toward Victor and his immediate family. He did not show me the documents or read the clauses aloud. He just said they existed and that they were written clearly enough to act if needed. He also mentioned Victor's estate planning. Again, he did not go into details. He only said that there were structures in place that involved Rosa and me and that recent events gave strong reasons to review and possibly change them. Martin said something that stuck with me. He said that people often believe that social power and loud voices can beat written words, until the day they find out they cannot. He said the law moves slowly but steadily, and that once certain things are set in motion, they are hard to stop. We talked for about an hour. By the end, Martin had a clear picture of what had happened at the wedding and what the general pattern of disrespect looked like. He suggested a next step. He would review all of Victor's documents related to the Alvarez businesses and his current estate plans. He would also, if we agreed, start collecting evidence of the wedding behavior and the ongoing comments. He asked me if I could try to get any videos from guests who had been there. I said I could try. As we left the office, Victor thanked me for being honest and present. He said that none of this was my fault, but that my choice to step up now mattered. That evening, back at my apartment, I sat at my small desk in the corner of the living room. The Just Married banner still hung in the kitchen, mocking me. I opened my laptop and started messaging a few friends who had been at the wedding. I kept my tone simple. I said that a lot had happened, that lawyers might need a clear picture later, and that if they had any videos or photos from the speeches, especially Tasha's, I would appreciate copies. Most of them answered quickly and kindly. They said they were sorry for the drama. A couple mentioned that they had already deleted some things because they did not like how cruel it looked on replay. Others still had everything. One friend sent me a short video clip. It showed Tasha mid-speech, waving the microphone, making a joke about my mother scoring big late in life, about Victor's money, about me being safe and simple. The laughter in the background sounded uncomfortable. The camera angle caught my mother in the frame, sitting very still, eyes shining. I watched it once, then stopped. My hands were shaking, but not from shock anymore. The scene was familiar now. What hit me was how clear and undeniable it looked on screen. There was no way to argue that it was just light teasing when you saw my mother's face. I saved the video in a folder. I named it with the date and a short description. Then I sat there for a few minutes, staring at the list of files. As I was about to close my laptop, another message came in from a different guest, someone I did not even know very well. It was a screenshot from a group chat I was not part of. The Alvarez cousins were in it. Tasha was one of them. The screenshot showed messages from the day before the wedding and from the night itself. They called my mother names. They joked about Victor being a walking checkbook. One line said that after the wedding, they would milk the old man for a new expansion to the restaurant. Another said that no matter how angry he got, he would not dare pull out because they would make a scene. I read the lines slowly, each one like a small weight dropped onto a scale. The guest wrote that they thought I should see this, that it was wrong, and that they were sorry they had laughed at the jokes at the time. They said they would understand if I did not reply. I took a deep breath and saved the screenshot next to the video. Then, without thinking too hard, I opened a new email, attached the files, and typed Martin's address into the recipient line. The next few days felt like walking through thick fog. Everything looked normal on the surface, but nothing felt the same. Lena tried to act like we were just dealing with a rough patch. She spent most of her time at her parents' house. When she was home, she was on the phone with relatives, speaking in quick, low tones, walking from room to room. I heard my name and my mother's name come up again and again, always followed by nervous laughter or sighs. I stopped asking what they were saying. I already knew the pattern. They would call what happened drama, miscommunication, and hurt feelings. They would never call it disrespect. When we did talk, it always came back to the same thing. She said she loved me, but she also said I needed to understand her family. She kept saying that if we wanted a future, we had to move past this and agree on a new ceremony plan. When I asked about a proper apology to my mother, she changed the subject. At night, when she finally fell asleep beside me, I lay awake and stared at the ceiling. The shadows on the wall looked like cracks. I kept thinking about something Noah had said in the coffee shop, that the wedding was not the start of the problem, it was the roof caving in. Work became my quiet place. I did my tasks, answered emails, and then, when there were gaps, I went back to my private folder. I added more screenshots and notes. I wrote down dates, who said what, where it happened. It felt strange putting my own life into a simple list, but it also made things clearer. Once something is written down, it is harder to lie to yourself about it. One evening, after Lena had gone back to her parents' house for yet another family meeting, I sat at my small desk in the corner of our living room. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the fridge. I clicked through the folder with the wedding video clips and group chat screenshots. I looked at my mother's face on the screen, and then at the lines where Tasha and the cousins joked about milking the old man. A question kept pressing on me. Was I really going to stay connected to people who saw me and my family as a joke and a bank? I realized that I was not just trying to choose between two families. I was trying to choose what kind of man I wanted to be. The quiet one who kept peace no matter the cost, or the one who finally drew a line. That night, I wrote down a list in a notebook, not on the screen. On one side, I wrote what staying would mean: more dinners at the restaurant, more jokes, more pressure to prove myself loyal by swallowing things that hurt my mother. On the other side, I wrote what leaving would mean: shame in their eyes, gossip, legal mess, but also distance and a chance for my mother to feel safe again. Looking at the two columns, the decision started to form. A couple of days later, Victor called and asked if I could come over again. He said he had spoken more with Martin, and there were things he wanted to discuss face to face. The way he spoke told me this was not just about the business side anymore. When I arrived at their townhouse, my mother was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes searched my face for signs. Victor was at the dining table with a neat stack of papers in a folder, but he closed it as I walked in. He did not open it again while I was there. We sat together. Victor spoke slowly. He said that he had lived long enough to learn that money, in the wrong hands, made people cruel instead of generous. He said he had seen families tear each other apart over the idea of what they thought they deserved. He looked at my mother. He said he never wanted her to be at the mercy of people like that. Then he looked at me. He said he trusted me to protect her when he could not. He explained in simple terms that he was going to make some changes to his plans. He did not go into legal details. He said that when everything was done, my mother would be safe, and I would have a formal role in making sure certain people never used his money as a weapon again. Hearing that made something settle inside me. For so long, I had felt like I was standing between two walls closing in. Lena's family on one side, my mother on the other. Now, for the first time, I felt like I had someone standing next to me. He asked me gently what I wanted to do about the marriage itself. He said he would support me if I chose to try again with Lena, but he also said I did not owe anyone the rest of my life just because invitations were printed. I told him the truth. I said that I could forgive mistakes, but I could not build a future with someone who thought my mother's dignity was a fair price for her family's comfort. I said I did not see a way back from that. He nodded. He said that in that case, I should talk to a family lawyer, not for revenge, but to make sure any step I took was clean and solid. A few days later, I found myself sitting in a courthouse lobby, holding a folder with my name and Lena's on the front. The floor was cold tile. People walked past me, some in suits, some in jeans, all carrying pieces of their own problems. The lawyer I met there was different from Martin. She was direct, with kind eyes. She asked me to tell her what had happened, not the emotional parts, but the simple facts. Date of the ceremony, what was signed, what was not, how long we had lived together, what our finances looked like. I told her everything I could. I mentioned that we had signed some civil papers before the ceremony, as required, but that the wedding itself had been called off publicly. I mentioned the way her family had treated my mother and the pressure to do a second ceremony on their terms. She explained my options in simple language. She said there were paths that treated this as a marriage and others that treated it as something that had never fully taken form. She told me the results of each path, what would happen with finances, what would happen with names, what would happen if things turned ugly. Then she asked me one question that cut through all the noise. She asked me what I wanted my life to look like in 5 years, and whether I could honestly see that life with Lena's family always in the room. I could not. The answer was clear. She slid some forms across the small table. She did not read them out loud. She just told me that if I signed them, it would start a process. Not a fast one, not an easy one, but a clean one. My hand shook a little when I picked up the pen, not because I doubted the choice, but because I understood that this was the moment I stopped waiting for things to magically get better. I signed where she showed me. She gathered the papers and said she would file them. When I stepped back into the courthouse hallway, the air felt heavy but sharp. I took a slow breath and realized that, for the first time since the wedding night, I did not feel like I was drifting. I had chosen a direction. That evening, I sat at my small desk again. The living room was dim. Lena was still at her parents' house. I opened my laptop and created one more folder. I named it with the date and the word final. I moved all the videos, screenshots, and notes into it. I added a simple text document where I wrote a timeline. Engagement date, first disrespectful comment I remembered, planning meetings, the rehearsal dinner, the wedding day, the restaurant office. I wrote down names next to each event. I was not doing this out of spite. I was doing it because I had finally accepted that feelings meant little if you could not back them up with facts when it mattered. Facts were what people like Carlos respected. Papers, numbers, records. So I would speak in the language they claimed to respect. Victor called a couple of days later. He said Martin was ready for a formal meeting with the Alvarez family. He said they had been informed that it was about clarifying his role and the future of their partnerships. He also said they were excited and nervous, convinced it was about a big gift or a transfer of control. The idea that they were expecting a reward made my stomach turn, but it also focused me. It showed how far away we were from the same reality. Victor asked if I was willing to attend that meeting. He did not pressure me. He said that my presence would matter, but that he would understand if I did not want to sit in a room with them again. I thought about my mother's face at the wedding. I thought about Tasha in the office, smirking as she talked about content and saying no one would ever dare make it legal. I thought about the lines in the group chat about milking the old man. So I said yes. I told him I would be there. We met once more at Rosa and Victor's townhouse before the big meeting. This time, the mood was calmer. My mother made tea and sat with us. Victor had another folder on the table, closed. He said that he and Martin had gone through everything. The loan agreements, the securities, the estate plans. He did not show me the inner pages. He simply said that decisions had been made, papers had been signed, and systems were in motion. He said the meeting with the Alvarezes would not be a negotiation. It would be an announcement. He asked me what I wanted to say, if anything, in that room. I thought for a moment. I said that I did not want to argue. I did not want to shout or trade insults. I just wanted to say, calmly, what happened to my mother and what that meant for me. My mother told me that whatever I decided to say, she was proud of me. She said that she had spent most of her life keeping her head down, and that seeing me stand up now made her feel less guilty for all the times she had not. On the morning of the meeting, I dressed in simple clothes, not a suit, just a clean shirt and dark pants. I did not want to look like someone playing a part in their show. I wanted to feel like myself. The city was gray and cool when I took the train downtown. I watched my reflection in the window between tunnels. I looked calmer than I felt. Martin's office building rose above the street, all glass and steel. Inside, the lobby buzzed with quiet energy. People moved with purpose. I checked in and rode the elevator up. When the doors opened on Martin's floor, I heard voices before I even saw anyone. Laughter, loud and familiar. I stepped into the hallway and saw through the glass of the big conference room that Carlos, Mariana, Lena, Tasha, Aunt Pilar, and a few other relatives were already inside. They were sitting around the long table, dressed nicely. Tasha had her phone on the table in front of her. She was laughing at something on the screen. Mariana was fixing her hair in the reflection of the glass. Carlos was leaning back in his chair, his foot tapping. For a second, watching them, it felt like I was outside a fish tank, looking in at people who still believed this was their world. Martin's assistant greeted me softly and asked if I wanted water or coffee. I said no, my mouth too dry already. She told me Martin and Victor were in his private office going over a few last things and that they would be out in a moment. I stood in the hallway, my hand resting on the back of a chair by the wall. The air felt still, like the pause before a storm. Then I heard it, the soft whir of a printer starting up somewhere down the hall. It was followed by the steady, rhythmic sound of paper feeding and stacking. The assistant walked over to the machine, and I saw the first page slide out. On the top of the stack, in clear black letters, I saw a bold line with the Alvarez family name and a few words I could read from where I was. A notice, something about acceleration, something about a trust. The assistant picked up the growing stack, straightened it, and slipped it into a folder. As she walked past me toward the conference room, the door to Martin's office opened behind her, and I stepped forward to follow her in. Martin's assistant opened the glass door, and I stepped into the conference room. Everyone went quiet for a second. Carlos looked surprised to see me. Mariana's smile flickered. Lena's eyes locked on mine, searching for a sign. Tasha glanced at her phone, then at the folders on the table. Victor and Martin were already seated at the far end. Martin asked everyone to sit. His voice was calm, almost gentle, the way a surgeon might speak before cutting. He said the meeting had two purposes. First, to address what had happened at the wedding. Second, to clarify Victor's position in the Alvarez businesses and his future plans. They shifted in their chairs at the word businesses. Martin started with the wedding. He said there had been conflicting stories, so he had collected neutral material. Then he tapped a remote. A screen on the wall lit up with a video. I watched their faces while the clip played. Tasha's voice filled the room, clear and sharp, talking about my mother as a gold digger, about my dead father, about Victor's money. The camera caught my mother's face, frozen and shining with tears. No one could say it was just teasing now. Martin then showed screenshots from their own group chat. Lines about milking Victor, about using the wedding to lock in money, about my mother's supposed greed. Tasha tried to say they were jokes. Carlos said context was missing. Martin only said that the words spoke for themselves. Then he opened the main folder. He explained that Victor was their secured lender, not just a friendly helper. The restaurant and the venue were collateral. There was a clause about respect toward Victor and his immediate family. He said that, based on recent events, Victor had chosen to exercise his rights. The loans were being called in. Control would transfer if they could not pay. Mariana went pale. Carlos started talking fast about family, about misunderstandings. Martin slid formal notices across the table. Then he explained the trust changes. Victor's future support would go to Rosa and me. The Alvarez family was removed as beneficiaries. Ethan Moore was now co-trustee, he said, nodding toward me. I added, in a steady voice, that I had already filed to end the marriage. I said I wished Lena well, but I would not tie my life or my mother's dignity to this family. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then everyone started talking at once. Carlos raised his voice. Mariana cried. Tasha reached for her phone, then froze, realizing this was not something she wanted to film. I pushed my chair back. I took off my ring and placed it on the folder with my name and Lena's. I thanked Martin for his time and Victor for his support. No one stopped me. As I walked out, the door closed softly behind me, cutting off the noise and leaving them alone with the papers they loved more than respect.